Every morning, Michael's daughter woke up covered in bruises. He was terrified and convinced his girlfriend was secretly hurting her. So he hid a camera in his daughter's room. What he caught on video was not abuse. It was something far more terrifying. Stay with us to the end, because you won't believe the truth. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far our stories travel. The Hayes family never imagined their lives would unravel under the roof of what seemed like an ordinary home. In Portland, Oregon, Michael Hayes worked long hours as a mechanic, his hands often stained with oil and grit, but his heart anchored to one purpose, providing stability for his daughter Emma. At 18, she had grown into a thoughtful young woman who preferred novels to noise, solitude to crowded halls. Since his divorce years earlier, Michael carried an unshakable guilt, the memory of Emma's small hand clinging to his as she cried for the family they had lost. That guilt made him protective, perhaps overly so. When Michael met Laura Benton, a woman with warmth but also her own edges, he believed he had found someone who could stand beside him in building a new life. But there was always one truth he made clear: Emma came first. Laura tried to respect it, though the bond between father and daughter often made her feel like a guest rather than a partner. For a time, they managed a delicate balance. It was the summer heat that revealed the first crack. Emma came down to breakfast one morning wearing shorts, her hair still damp from a shower, her face half hidden behind a book. Michael nearly dropped his coffee. Dark bruises dotted her pale legs, irregular, ugly shapes that spoke of pain. "Emma, what happened?" he asked, voice tight. She didn't look up. "I don't know. I just woke up like this." The answer unsettled him. One bruise could be explained, two maybe, but these were many and clustered. He asked Laura if she had noticed anything. Laura frowned, shook her head. "She's probably bumping into things. She's clumsy sometimes." Michael wanted to believe it, but something in his gut whispered otherwise. Days passed, and new bruises appeared, even as the old ones faded. Emma grew quieter, avoiding meals, locking herself in her room. At night, Michael swore he heard strange thuds from upstairs, muffled noises he couldn't place. Each morning, he would see fresh marks on Emma's skin. Fear crept into his heart, and suspicion followed close behind. He confronted Laura one night after Emma had gone to bed. "Are you hiding something from me?" His voice shook with anger he didn't want to feel. Laura's eyes widened in disbelief. "Michael, how could you even say that? You think I'd hurt her?" The argument ended in silence, but doubt lingered. What Michael didn't know was that the truth would not only test his trust, it would drag his family into a nightmare none of them expected. Michael tried to brush it off as ordinary teenage clumsiness, but the bruises kept multiplying. Each time Emma wore shorts, he counted more. They spread across her thighs and calves, sometimes faint, sometimes so dark they looked painful. "Emma, you need to tell me the truth," he urged one evening at dinner. But she only picked at her food, eyes fixed on her plate. "Dad, I don't know. Please stop asking." The rejection cut deep. Emma had always been able to talk to him about anything, about the divorce, about her fears at school, about the friends who drifted away. Now she was shutting him out, and he couldn't stand it. Michael began to spend sleepless nights on the couch, listening for sounds upstairs. More than once, he thought he heard dull thuds, like someone stumbling in the dark. When he crept up to check, the house stood silent, Emma asleep behind a locked door. Laura grew frustrated with his paranoia. "You're imagining things," she said. "Teenagers change. Let her be." But Michael couldn't. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. The tension between him and Laura thickened, their whispered arguments turning sharp. Michael felt torn between protecting his daughter and salvaging his relationship. Every bruise on Emma's skin tilted the balance further. One morning, things came to a head. Michael sat at the kitchen table, staring at Emma's legs covered in fresh marks. His voice broke as he asked, "Emma, please, is someone hurting you? Is it Laura?" Emma looked horrified. "What? No! Why would you think that?" She stormed off, slamming her door, leaving Michael trembling with guilt. Laura, standing in the doorway, glared at him with wounded eyes. "You think I'd hurt her?" she whispered. He couldn't answer. Desperate, Michael took Emma to their family doctor. He explained the bruises, the exhaustion, the strange noises. The doctor ordered blood tests and a physical exam. A week later, the results came back normal. No anemia, no clotting disorder, no hidden condition. "She's perfectly healthy," the doctor said, but the reassurance rang hollow. If nothing was wrong, then what was happening? Days later, a knock came at the door. Michael opened it to find a woman in a tailored blazer with a clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as Mrs. Franklin from Social Services. Michael's stomach dropped. "We received a report," she said firmly. "Your daughter's physician is concerned about possible abuse." The words sliced through him like a blade. Abuse. The very thing he had been afraid of, and now he was the suspect. He stammered denials, trying to explain the mystery of the bruises. But Mrs. Franklin's face remained unreadable. She asked to speak with Emma privately. Michael reluctantly agreed, heart pounding as the door to his daughter's room closed behind them. Minutes stretched like hours. Michael paced the hallway, straining to hear but catching only muffled voices. When the door finally opened, Emma emerged with tears streaking her cheeks. "I told her the truth," she sobbed, clinging to him. "I don't know how it happens, Dad. I just wake up like this." Mrs. Franklin thanked them and said she would follow up, leaving a cloud of suspicion in her wake. Michael felt fury burn in his chest, not at Emma, not even at the social worker, but at the helplessness of not knowing. He had begged his daughter, trusted the doctors, clashed with Laura, and now his family's name was being dragged into doubt. That night, as Emma cried herself to sleep, Michael made a decision. If no one else could give him answers, he would find them himself. He went online, ordered a night vision camera, and prepared to uncover the truth. Michael could no longer think straight. Every time he looked at his daughter's pale skin covered in bruises, guilt gnawed at him like a beast. He had promised himself after the divorce that he would protect her no matter the cost. Now, that promise felt broken. The doctor said nothing was wrong. The social worker left him under a shadow of suspicion. Laura barely spoke to him, her silence heavy with resentment. And Emma was slipping further away, retreating into herself, answering his questions with tired shrugs or tears. That night, Michael stayed awake long after the house had gone quiet. He sat in the living room, staring at the unopened box containing the camera he had ordered. The weight of it on the coffee table felt like the last chance he had to save his daughter. His hands shook as he opened it, threading cables, hiding the device. In Emma's bookshelf where its lens pointed discreetly at her bed. He hated the invasion of privacy, but fear outweighed shame. If the truth could be captured, maybe it would finally set them free. The following evening, he told Emma goodnight, brushing a hand gently against her shoulder. She looked pale, exhausted. "Sleep well, sweetheart," he whispered, though his heart thudded with dread. Hours later, when the house was silent and only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the air, Michael sat before the monitor, eyes locked on the feed. At first nothing happened. Emma lay still, her book slipping from her hands as her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Michael rubbed his eyes, almost convincing himself it was all in his head. Then, 30 minutes into the recording, the air shifted. Emma's body jolted. Her arms twitched. At first it looked like restlessness, but within seconds she was thrashing violently. Her legs slammed against the mattress, her head jerked to the side, her hands clawed at the sheets as though fighting something unseen. Michael's mouth went dry. His heart hammered so loudly he could barely hear himself breathe. He leaned closer, eyes wide, refusing to blink. This wasn't fidgeting. This was violent, terrifying, and utterly unnatural. "My God," he muttered under his breath. Her body bent in angles no parent should ever see their child endure. She struck her legs against the bed frame with such force that Michael understood instantly where the bruises had come from. "Laura!" he shouted, his voice cracking. She stumbled out of bed, rubbing her eyes, only to freeze when she saw the screen. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Michael, what is happening to her?" Neither of them could look away. It went on for minutes that felt like lifetimes, until Emma suddenly stilled. She turned on her side, clutching her pillow as though nothing had happened. The room on the screen returned to quiet. Michael sat in silence, his skin clammy, his heart pounding as if it would burst. Laura's hand found his arm, trembling. "She doesn't even know," she whispered. Michael rose, rushing upstairs to Emma's room. She lay peacefully under the blankets, her face calm, breaths even. He touched her shoulder gently. "Emma," he whispered. She stirred, half asleep. "Dad?" she murmured groggily, confused. "What's wrong?" He couldn't bring himself to tell her. "Nothing." "Go back to sleep," he whispered, forcing a steady tone. But inside, he was unraveling. Back downstairs, he and Laura sat in silence, both haunted by what they had seen. For Michael, relief mixed with horror. He finally knew the bruises were not from Laura, not from abuse, not from anything supernatural. But the reality was no less terrifying. His daughter's own body was betraying her in the dark of night. By morning, his course was clear. He would not rest until he had answers. He gathered the footage, called the doctor again, and demanded an urgent referral. He would fight every door, every doubt, until someone could explain what was happening to his daughter. For the first time in months, Michael felt a glimmer of hope, but it was tangled with dread of what truth he might uncover. The morning after the recording, Michael barely touched his coffee. His mind was replaying the images of Emma's body jerking and twisting in her sleep. When she walked into the kitchen, hair messy, rubbing her eyes, he felt his chest tighten. How could she look so normal when he had watched her live through a nightmare only hours earlier? "Emma," he said gently, sliding a chair out for her. "We need to talk." She sat, still half asleep, and frowned when he placed the laptop in front of her. With trembling hands, he hit play. At first, her face was blank, just watching herself asleep. But then the thrashing began. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and she recoiled from the screen. "Dad, that's me?" she whispered. I don't remember any of that." Michael reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "I know, sweetheart. I know you don't, but this is what's been happening to you. And this is why you keep waking up covered in bruises." Tears brimmed in her eyes. For the first time, she understood that her father hadn't been imagining things, and she hadn't been losing her mind. That afternoon, Michael marched into the doctor's office with Laura and Emma by his side. He set the laptop on the desk, pressed play, and folded his arms. The doctor leaned in, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. By the time the footage ended, he sat back in his chair, stunned. "I've never seen anything like this before," he admitted, "but I know who might be able to help." He scribbled down a referral to a neurologist and explained they would need specialized testing. Michael clutched the paper like a lifeline. For weeks he had been drowning in fear and suspicion. Now, finally, a path forward was opening. The neurologist's office was a sterile world of white walls and quiet humming machines. Emma lay on a hospital bed with wires taped to her scalp, her father sitting beside her, holding her hand. She tried to smile, but her voice shook. "What if they don't find anything?" "They will," Michael said firmly, though his heart ached. "And whatever it is, we'll face it together." The overnight test was long and grueling. Sensors measured Emma's brain waves, her breathing, her heartbeat, her movements. Michael barely slept, his eyes fixed on the monitor as though sheer willpower could protect her. Laura sat in the corner, silent but present, her earlier resentment replaced by worry. The next morning, the neurologist entered with a file in his hands and a grave expression. He laid out the results, pointing to abnormal activity in Emma's temporal lobe. "Your daughter has epilepsy," he said carefully. "Specifically, temporal lobe epilepsy. The episodes you saw are nocturnal seizures. They're violent, unpredictable, and leave her body battered. But now that we know, we can treat them." Michael sat frozen. The word epilepsy echoed in his mind like thunder. Relief and dread battled in his chest. Finally, an answer, but one that carried the weight of a lifelong condition. He looked at Emma, who stared down at her lap, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. He leaned close and whispered, "This isn't your fault, and we'll handle it together." The neurologist prescribed anti-seizure medication and assured them that many patients live full, normal lives once their symptoms are under control. Michael nodded, clinging to that hope like a rope in a storm. For the first time in months, he felt the faintest light breaking through the darkness. The bruises had a cause. The mystery had an answer. His daughter's suffering finally had a name. But names alone could not erase the fear of watching Emma thrash helplessly in her bed. That fear would haunt him until the day he saw her sleep peacefully again. The weeks that followed were filled with careful monitoring, doses of medication, and quiet hope. Michael kept a watchful eye on Emma, studying her face every morning as though searching for signs of struggle. To his relief, the bruises stopped appearing. Each night, Emma slept through without violent thrashing, her body finally at peace. The change was almost immediate. Her mood lifted, her laughter, once rare, returned in small bursts. She came downstairs for breakfast willingly, even helped Laura with dinner now and then. The hollow look in her eyes faded as energy crept back into her step. It was as though the girl Michael had feared was slipping away had finally returned. Laura, too, softened. The tension between her and Michael, once thick with suspicion, eased into quiet understanding. She had been hurt by his doubts, but she stayed, standing by his side through Emma's appointments and late-night worries. In the end, the ordeal that had nearly torn them apart became the thread that stitched them closer together. One evening, Michael lingered outside Emma's bedroom door, listening. No thuds, no cries, only the gentle rhythm of her breathing. He stepped inside, watching her sleep peacefully under the soft glow of her bedside lamp. She looked fragile yet strong, her hands curled beneath her cheek like the little girl he remembered from years ago. He sat down quietly in the chair beside her bed, emotion welling in his chest. All the fear, the accusations, the desperate searches for answers, they had nearly broken him. Yet through it all, one truth had guided him, a father's instinct to protect his child. That instinct had carried them through the darkness, even when the path was clouded with suspicion and doubt. Michael reached for her hand, whispering softly, "You're safe now, Emma, I promise." The nightmare that had once seemed like abuse, or even something unexplainable, turned out to be a hidden medical battle. But in discovering the truth, the Hayes family found something greater than fear. They found resilience. Emma's diagnosis brought clarity, and her recovery brought peace. For Michael, the ordeal became more than a fight for answers. It became a reminder of what it truly meant to be a parent, to stand unwavering even when the world doubts you, to believe in your child when others question her, to fight until the truth is known. And as Emma dreamed quietly in the safety of her room, Michael finally let himself breathe. The bruises were gone. The mystery was solved, and his daughter could at last rest in the kind of peace every parent prays their child will always have. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought against enemies outside, but within our very own bodies. What began as a nightmare of suspicion and fear for the Hayes family turned out to be a hidden medical condition, one that could finally be treated once the truth came to light. Michael's journey reminds us that love, persistence, and trust can cut through even the darkest mysteries. Have you ever witnessed something unexplainable that later had a surprising answer? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more powerful tales that will keep you thinking long after they end. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.